Hi, I'm Phoebe.
Hi, I'm Brandon.
Hi, I'm Abigail.
Hi, I'm Drew.
I'm on staff with Christian Student Fellowship.
My name is Dustin. I'm actually also on staff with CSF.
I'm Hannah, and this is Liam, and we are on staff with CSF.
Welcome to Solid Ground. Solid Ground is basically our main meeting throughout the week. We want to make sure there's a time set aside where our students can enjoy the Lord's Word and be fed with spiritual nourishment. And so that's this time, Tuesdays at 7.
Hey! So, description box below has the outline. Follow along. You can click the link if you want, and then you can save the outline so you can refer to it later. Grab your friends and let's get started.
Welcome back, everyone. So we have been working our way through the book of Romans this semester, and Brandon started us off with an intro, and Dustin covered 4 chapters for us in a week, and then we spent a week in 5, a week in 6, and we gave you 2 weeks of 7, because, wow, that's a complicated chapter. And so appropriately, we gave you 3 weeks of Romans 8, because, wow, there is so much in Romans 8. So now, I'm going to give you 1 week of Romans 9. And you're probably used to seeing a variety of verses pop up over here as we go through. I'm actually going to do something fairly different this week. As I read through and was preparing, I kept trying to figure out which verses I could trim out, or which verses I could select out of chapter 9 that on their own would present the thoughts kind of encapsulated in this chapter. And I didn't feel like I could do that without missing all of the context. And there's only 30 of them, so your outline is Romans 9. Surprise! So I'm not going to put it over here because it would be like this big by like this big, and you would conveniently for both of us not see my face the whole time. So you're going to have to look at the outline or your Bible, which would be great. So I'm going to preface this. I'm going to give you a little intro to know what to listen for and what to expect, and then we'll just dig through a few chunks of this chapter until we get to the end. So firstly, I want to tell you that as chapters of the Bible written by Paul go, this one's pretty straightforward. So hopefully you should walk away with 2 pretty clear impressions. Which leads me right into the next point. Paul has 2 very clear thoughts that he's conveying in Romans 9. And I don't want you to miss those. So and there's a question at the end to drill the point home, but if you walk away not having 2 key items at the end of this video, rewind and figure out what you missed. Because these are really important. Neither of them are new thoughts, actually. Paul thought these 2 things were so important that he doubled back and spent... there were no chapter breaks when he wrote this, but he spent a significant amount of text reiterating these 2 things. So now that I've built them up, let's dig into the text here, and we'll see what we see. So, not on the screen, but in your Bible, you will find... I have to pull it up. Okay, paper shuffled. In Romans 9:1, Paul starts off, I'm speaking the truth in Christ. I'm not lying. My conscience bears witness in the Holy Spirit that I have great sorrow and unceasing anguish in my heart. Okay, so Paul is really struggling with this. This is not a casual thing on his heart. For I could wish that I myself were accursed and cut off from Christ for the sake of my brothers, my kinsmen according to the flesh. So, he says they are Israelites. So he's saying very clearly how passionate he is that the other Israelites, the other Jews, would realize and receive what he has realized and received in Christ. He's really desperate that they would receive the gospel, even so much as to say, I would I would give up my place in Christ, what I'm enjoying in Christ, for them if I could. So it's important that you know this is his heart. His heart is very clearly for all of Israel to receive Christ and be saved. And that comes to bear on both of the points that are going to come out. So he says, they are Israelites, and to them, to Israel, belong the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the law, the worship, and the promises. To them belong the patriarchs, and from their race, according to the flesh, is the Christ, who has God over all, blessed and forever. Amen. So, Paul is laying out that this people, this physical family of people, Israel, who are all descended from Abraham, and Abraham through Isaac through Jacob, to them were spoken all of these promises. It's their proper inheritance. All these things we told you about in Romans 8. Romans 8 was Israel's inheritance. It was God's original design. You could say when man first saw the plan, when the plan was introduced to man, it was everything that was promised that's fulfilled in Romans 8 was only promised to Israel at that time. Unless you're Jewish. If you're Jewish, I'm not talking to you right now. The rest of us had no part in that promise. We had no access to that promise. It was as foreign to us as the benefits of U.S. citizenship are foreign to, a Russian or Chinese citizen. We had no part in what Paul actually calls the Commonwealth of Israel. The common sharing of all of God's blessings. So he's saying, to Israel, all of this originally belonged. Okay, but, starting back and forth, but it is not as though the word of God has failed. For not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel. Not all are children of Abraham because they are his offspring. But through Isaac shall your offspring be named. All right, so Abraham had another son, right? God calls Abraham and he says, to your seed is the blessing, are all the promises. And then he has Ishmael first. But God doesn't extend this promise and this blessing to Ishmael. And that's complicated. There are reasons. And I think we've talked about some of them already. But the promise is to Isaac. Isaac is the child of promise. So through Isaac shall your offspring be named. This means that it is not the children of the flesh, the children of Abraham's effort, Ishmael and his descendants, who are the children of God, but the children of the promise. And Isaac's the child of promise because Isaac came when it was physically impossible for Isaac to have come, right? So what produced Isaac? It wasn't Abraham's planning. It wasn't Abraham's strength. It wasn't Sarah's strength or ability or health. It was literally just God's promise that brought forth Isaac. So that's not a main point, but don't miss that. For this is what the promise said: about this time next year I will return, and Sarah shall have a son. And not only so, but also when Rebekah has conceived children by one man, our forefather Isaac. So he's skipping down a generation here. This verse, this is a crazy verse. Though they were not yet born and had done nothing, either good or bad, in order that God's purpose of election might continue, not because of works, but because of him who calls, she was told, the older will serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. Okay, these kids had not been born. Like this is the point, right? Rebekah, it's spoken to Rebekah that the older will serve the younger, which is the opposite of how it ought to be culturally for them. And he says, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. If you're familiar with this story, Jacob is not the more lovable of those two brothers. Jacob was a mess. And Jacob was not just a mess like as a teenager, like teenagers are a mess. And then we kind of like turn 20, 24-ish, grow a prefrontal cortex, as Dustin likes to point out, and we kind of figure life out. Now, Jacob was a mess for like a long time. Like when you read through Genesis and follow the story of Jacob's life, wow, dude. On the other hand, I mean, Esau has a few failings, but and we don't get the detail. We don't get nearly as much detail of Esau's life. But we don't get an implication that Esau is nearly as wily, crafty, or mischievous is a light way to put it, as Jacob. Jacob literally means supplanter or deceiver. And yet God chose Jacob to say, Jacob I loved. He chose Jacob to allow arrangements in their life that would make Esau serve Jacob instead of vice versa. Why? What is this? Well, you have to go back where Paul is saying that it's not. Sorry, I'm trying to find it again. Yeah, okay, here in 11, this verse. In order that God's purpose of election might continue, not because of works, but because of him who calls. Okay, so this is the first point I really want you to see out of this chapter, that God's plan and our salvation, which are two sides of the same thing. Those are two perspectives of the same phenomenon. God has something he wants to do, and I think we've talked about that a lot, that you weren't just saved because God looked down and thought you were pretty pathetic, which we were. I mean, God didn't look down and see how pathetic Drew was and decide, oh, I guess I'll go die for him. He made man in his own image. I mean, so from the very beginning, okay, I'm not going to recap the whole thing. God had a purpose that he would be expressed. He would have a church who is collectively his bride, who expresses his heart and his person, right? So, from God's side, that's what he's doing. Well, from your side, what happened was, all of us, from our perspective, we were pretty pathetic and enemies of God. And at a certain time, something happened. We heard the gospel and we believed it, and we got saved. And we entered into this process that we've been talking about a lot these last few weeks of getting to know God, enjoying God, growing in God. So all of this, both sides of this are all in this context of that God's purpose might continue, not because of works. So this goes back to though they were not yet born, and they had done nothing, either good or bad. There weren't, of the two twins, there wasn't a good kid and a bad kid. There were just two twins in the womb, having done nothing. And yet, God had a purpose that he wanted to carry out, and it had nothing to do with behavior. Okay, so that's really the key point here, is that God, for his purpose, in his wisdom, before all of this whole creation was spun out for us to even exist in, God picked you. God looked through time and saw me, for whatever reason, and saw you, and he put a mark. He picked us and said, I'm going to use that one. That one right there, that one right there will be part of me fulfilling my purpose and carrying out my plan. Okay, so let's move on, and this will get a little clearer. 14. What shall we say then? Is there injustice on God's part? By no means. Well, he's saying, if God picks some and doesn't pick others. So that's what he's addressing. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I'll have compassion on whom I have compassion. Okay, so he says, I will have mercy and compassion on whom I will. So the implication is, it's easy for us to think we were all generally pretty good, we're just kind of neutral, and if someone's bad, something must have really happened to push them over to being a bad person, and vice versa for a good person. So it's like, is God choosing to make some people bad and make some people good? Well, you have to remember that since the fall of Adam and Eve, we're all bad. I mean, we all have this life of Satan in us, if you'll remember from previous weeks, that is coming out and being expressed in really ugly, evil ways. And even if you've had a pretty chill life, the fact that it hasn't the fact that you're not an axe murderer and that hasn't expressed itself doesn't mean the same satanic nature that made that guy do that isn't in you. And this is a really heavy thing to see. And I'm just kind of like dropping this in the middle of a passage here, but this is a really heavy thing to see. When you realize that we're all cut out of the same hunk, the saying is the same hunk of cheese. We're all cut out of the same hunk of clay, because Adam means clay. And when you survey history and you see the horrible things that have happened, you're made out of the same stuff they are. I'm made out of the same stuff they are. So the only difference between me and you and those people is that God in his mercy has arranged our circumstances so that maybe we haven't done something as awful as others have done. So don't ever, when you see what you think is an awful person, don't judge them thinking they're all that different than you, or that you're all that much better than them. We're made out of the same thing. So that's why God says, I will have mercy and compassion on whom I'll have mercy and compassion. Because every human was in a condition needing mercy and compassion. It's not that some are shoved off the cliff, so to speak. It's that all were in free fall, and God stepped in and chose some to cause to choose him. I really don't have time to dig into there's a massive rabbit hole that I could go down about free will and predestination and how those coexist. If God picked you and had a plan to cause you to choose him, then did you really have free will? Is that actually choosing God? Did the people who didn't choose God, that's actually what he's asking. Did the people who didn't choose God, because he didn't cause them to choose him, did God, in a complicated way, force them to not choose him? Paul directly says, that's not our place. It's not our place to accuse God of that. But also we have to remember that asking the question in that kind of way is trying to sit on the same level as God and ask, you're trying to ask God that question as though you were his peer and were on the same scope as him. One thing that really helped me understand this was when I realized, because I grew up with horses, training horses. When I buy a horse from someone, I have chosen and paid for and predestined that horse to be my horse. And he really doesn't have a choice in it. He does have a free will. Horses have a lot of will. If you have any experience with them, wow, they have a lot of will. They really know how to express themselves and tell you what they don't like. And they're big, so that can be a problem. If you're not wise, there are not many long-term horsemen who are fools, because they're very big animals, if you get what I'm saying. But at the same time, I'm quite a bit smarter than that horse. His brain, horses are smart. They're pretty smart. They can open gates. They're pretty crafty. Anyway, they're pretty smart. But their brain's about that big. They're nowhere near the capacity of a human. So it's not that big of a leap to understand how a horse ticks, understand the basic instincts, the basic nature of a horse. And once you know that, once you understand a few key things about how they work, I can cause that horse to choose to be my friend. I can cause that horse to choose to cooperate with me. I can't force him. He weighs like 1,800 pounds. That's like 10 of me. There's no physically forcing a horse to do your will. But with some wisdom, he will. So when you step back and realize that God is God, and he's not another person who happens, he's not your average Joe who happens to be high, just be sitting on a cloud somewhere. When you realize he is God, and his thoughts are beyond our thoughts, and his ways are beyond our ways, it's not that baffling to acknowledge that we have a free capacity to choose or reject, and yet God is still able to arrange our lives and reveal himself in a way that we can't not choose him. So that's like, what? How long did I go there? 5 minutes down a rabbit hole I promised I wouldn't go down. So that's that. But I think it's good to know that your choice your choosing God was real and mattered. And also know that he's the one who caused you to choose, and he's the one who is keeping you, safeguarding that choice. Okay, so let's keep going. 6 minutes down that rabbit hole I said I wouldn't go down. So then he has mercy on whomever he wills, and he hardens whoever he wills. You will say to me then, why does he still find fault? Like that's what I just mentioned. For who can resist his will? But who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Who are you, O man, to answer back to God? I mean, do you see what he's saying? Will what is molded say to the molder, why have you made me like this? Has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same lump one vessel for honor? I mentioned we're all cut out of the same hunk of clay. This is where I got that. Has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same lump one vessel for honor and another for dishonorable use? What if God, desiring to show his wrath and to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction? So there are some people, very briefly, indulge me. There will be people who will never be justified by Christ's sacrifice because they will not accept him. The Bible's very clear about that. In Revelation, there's what's called the lake of fire, into which Satan and his angels are thrown, and also people because all people were joined to Satan through the fall. But then, there will be people who, we were cut off from Satan and joined to Christ, joined to God. So, when Satan is thrown in the lake of fire, that has nothing to do with us, because we're not connected to him anymore. Well, that opportunity is, I promise you, that opportunity, there's a lot of verses about this. You'll actually see some in the coming chapters. There's an opportunity for every human being to be cut off from Satan and joined to Christ. And none of us would have chosen it had God not caused us to choose him. That's what we talked about a minute ago. But this is where God is saying, he endured vessels of dishonor, vessels of wrath. Those are people. The clay refers to people whose contents are to be judged, because they would never let God empty Satan out of their vessel and fill them with God instead. And in those verses, and this is proof that this opportunity is intended for every human. In the same verses talking about Satan and his angels being thrown in the lake of fire, it says the lake of fire, which was not made for man, but for Satan and his angels. So God's heart and his intention proved where he says, that God desires all men be saved and come to the full knowledge of the truth. God's intention is that no human being would be thrown in the lake of fire with Satan. I mean, God, we're made in God's image. Humanity is a beautiful thing to him. But it does say, because there's this cosmic drama between, God and angels playing out where Satan rebelled, and God is exposing this rebellion for the ugly thing it is. And part of that drama is this verse right here, that God, desiring to show his wrath and make known his power, has endured vessels with much patience, vessels of wrath prepared for destruction. This is hard for us to follow. This is really hard for us to reconcile and wrap our head around. Don't take this casually. You should really go to God about this. It's okay to wrestle with it. It's okay to feel uncomfortable with this point, because when we realize we're uncomfortable with something in the Word, that means you've found something you don't understand. You've found something that you've found the border of your vision of what God is doing. And it's a great opportunity for you to just be before God, be honest about where you're at and how it seems to you, and be open for him to show you something. Because as that vision expands, you see so much more and you gain so much more, and you appreciate him so much more. So don't be afraid to struggle with this. Anyway, okay, I'll keep going. Wrath, vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, in order to make known the riches of his glory. So this is the flip side. The riches of his glory, which Romans 8. When you hear riches of his glory, think Romans 8 and everything we spent 3 weeks talking about. For vessels of mercy, which he prepared beforehand for glory. So, there were, even us, whom he has called, not from the Jews only, but also from the Gentiles. Okay, so all of us human vessels were vessels of wrath, except he chose some and caused us to choose him in return to be vessels of mercy. We're vessels of mercy because we received mercy to remove us from that pitiful situation into a situation where he could pour his contents into us. Again, Romans 8. And he didn't just choose Jews. That's going back to what Paul opened the chapter with. Originally, all of these promises were open only to the Jews. In Hebrews, there are verses where probably Paul probably wrote Hebrews. So, I always quote the author of Hebrews as probably Paul. The author of Hebrews makes it clear that because the Jews rejected Christ, the invitation became open to all humans. So we actually have an opportunity to receive Christ because they rejected him. And God will cause the Jews in time to accept Christ and return to him. So anyway, God works even that out for blessing. So even us, Gentiles, we were chosen as vessels of mercy to receive this content and enjoy God. And then he goes on and explains this as Paul's showing this from the Old Testament. As indeed he says in Hosea, those who were not my people, I will call my people. And her who was not beloved, I will call beloved. And in the very place where it was said to them, "You are not my people," there they will be called sons of the living God. That's amazing. And Isaiah cries out. He doesn't say Isaiah says. He says Isaiah cries out concerning Israel. "Though the number of the sons of Israel be as the sand of the sea, only a remnant of them will be saved. For the Lord will carry out his sentence upon the earth fully and without delay." And as Isaiah predicted, if the Lord of hosts had not left us offspring, we would have been like Sodom and become like Gomorrah. I think most of you know what happened there. If not, pause, ask someone. What shall we say then? That Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness have attained it? That is a righteousness that is by faith. But that Israel, who pursued a law that would lead to righteousness, did not succeed in reaching that law. Why? Because they did not pursue it by faith, but as if it were based on works. They have stumbled over the stumbling block. And he explains that. "As it is written, behold, I'm laying in Zion," that's the center of Jerusalem, "a stone of stumbling, a rock of offense. And whoever believes in him," so who do you think the stone is? Him will not be put to shame. Okay, and that's actually where the chapter wraps. So, I told you there were 2 points, right? And the beginning point, at the top, I showed you, I underlined a verse, and a couple of verses, and I showed you that regardless of your behavior, God chose you. It had nothing to do with you. You didn't do anything that attracted God's attention, causing him to choose you. In many cases, I feel like I'm one of, the cases to the opposite. It's like, it made no sense to choose some of us, except to show off how rich his mercy was. If you choose the good kids, like the not so bad kids, okay, you're merciful. But if you choose, if you're adopting kids and you purposefully pick the worst to show off what a wise and merciful parent you are, to raise even the worst kids into the best adults, that's God's heart, was to show off the riches of his mercy. He chose even from among the worst of humanity to save us, sanctify us, pour his heart and his riches into us. So even the worst of humanity, humans who Satan had damaged to the very worst, Satan had done his worst to those people. Some of those people God has turned into expressions of his own heart. Ask someone in the room tonight, if they know, or look it up online, the story behind the man who wrote the song. Who wrote the song "Amazing Grace." That will blow you away. You don't get a better picture of God choosing the worst of humanity and pouring out his heart. So that's the first point, right? We were not in any way deserving. Okay, sorry. We were in no way deserving to be chosen. But the second point, once God did choose us, the second point Paul really hammers home here at the end of the chapter. And this isn't a new point. He's been talking about salvation by faith, actually literally from chapter 1. But there's no clearer way that it's said than here in these last couple of verses, 30 through 32. Because he says why. What shall we say? Gentiles, that's us. We weren't pursuing righteousness before God. Gentile religion, pagan religion, was not centered around pursuing righteousness. It was all centered around trying to keep their pagan gods from doing awful things to them. Appeasing gods who were presumably bad actors. That's pretty much the common theme you see throughout a lot of pagan antiquity. So there was no pursuit of righteousness there. And yet God caused us through faith to find righteousness in his eyes. But Israel, who was trying to be righteous, they had the requirements. They had the list. And they were trying to do it. They did not succeed. Why? Because they did not pursue it by faith, but as if it were based on works. And so they stumbled. And so that's the second point, was you were chosen by no merit of your own, but because God wanted to show off his mercy, his love, his riches. And once you were chosen, you weren't expected. God has no interest in your behavior. He has no interest in your ability to be good now that you're chosen. What he's interested in is you believing that his mercy is so rich as to choose you and cause you to live out Romans 8. That you would have faith that Romans 8 could flow out of you. So that's the second point, that in no way is this related to your behavior. And I'll just give away one of the questions. That's the trap, is that as a believer, at some point we read Galatians. Like, take what I'm saying right now and go read, it's a short book, go read Galatians. He nails this hard. In no way, having started out by faith, does God expect us to rely on behavior. He always expects us to rely on faith. And obviously a living faith, enjoying God, behavior will flow out. But what God enjoys and appreciates and values is faith. So 2 big points out of a fairly straightforward chapter with Paul. I addressed predestination because it comes up, and it's easy for that to distract you from what Paul is saying. Probably shouldn't have gone there, because that's really not even, whether or not we chose, and that whole philosophical ramble is really not Paul's focus. He does not care about that. He cares that you see, in a very positive way, God chose you, and that what God expects is for you to continue in the belief and the enjoyment that comes out of that belief. So I've put a few questions at the end here to just hopefully drill that home and kind of provoke a little conversation. And this chapter ends on kind of a peculiarly hard note, or kind of a hard stop. That's because it rolls right into chapter 10. And I almost grabbed the first few verses of chapter 10, but then I would have done the same thing as 9 and just put the whole chapter there, and we'd be here all night. So get in a group, talk about this, talk about what's hard to get, what's hard to swallow, what's enjoyable about this chapter. In your group, or if you're not with someone now, call someone, talk about it. And then come back next week, because we're going to keep digging into this, and it just keeps getting better. So thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you soon, guys. Bye.